As Lizzie stood at the altar, heart racing and gaze fixed on the man she was about to marry, she had no idea that her entire world was about to be shattered by a revelation so astonishing that everyone in the church would be left in shock. What would you do if the person you loved most had been hiding a secret that could change everything? But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. Lizzie had always believed that love came when you least expected it. She was warm-hearted and empathetic, always eager to help those in need. Her friends often teased her for being too kind, but despite the compassion she showed others, love had never seemed to find her, until she met Ryan. It all started one evening at a local charity event in New York City. Lizzie had volunteered at a fundraiser when she first noticed him. Ryan was sitting quietly in a corner, observing the crowd with a peaceful expression. His wheelchair wasn't what drew her attention. It was the sense of calm he exuded. There was something about him that piqued her interest, a quiet strength that made her want to know more. As the evening went on, Lizzie found herself sneaking glances at Ryan. Then, as if destiny had intervened, he wheeled himself toward her during a lull in the event. "Hi," he said, his voice soft yet steady. "You seem to be the heart of this place. I've watched you running around helping everyone." Caught off guard by his observation, Lizzie blushed slightly. "I just like helping," she replied with a shy smile. "It's kind of my thing." Ryan chuckled. "Well, the world could use more people like you." The conversation between them flowed effortlessly. They discussed everything from the event to their hobbies, and soon the conversation drifted into deeper topics. Lizzie quickly realized that Ryan wasn't just kind. He was intelligent, funny, and thoughtful. His disability wasn't something he dwelled on, and soon it wasn't something she thought about much either. He gave her his phone number before they parted ways that night, but Lizzie hesitated. In the days that followed, Lizzie couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. There was something about him that made her heart feel light, yet the fact that he was in a wheelchair brought mixed emotions. She had never dated someone with a disability before, and she wondered if it would be challenging. Could she handle it? What would people think? Despite her reservations, Lizzie decided to reach out to Ryan. His reply came almost instantly, and before long they had arranged to meet for their first official date. Nervous and unsure of how it would go, Lizzie worried about how people might react, or if things would feel awkward. But the moment Ryan greeted her at the cafe with his warm smile, all her fears evaporated. They spent hours talking, sharing stories and laughter. Lizzie found herself completely captivated by Ryan, not because of his disability, but because of who he was. Their connection deepened quickly. Lizzie soon realized that Ryan's wheelchair wasn't something that defined him. In fact, she rarely thought about it when they were together. He had a way of making her feel seen, heard, and appreciated like no one else ever had. For the first time in her life, Lizzie felt herself truly falling in love. However, as their relationship grew stronger, Lizzie couldn't ignore a small seed of doubt that had planted itself in her mind. While she was deeply in love with Ryan, she occasionally found herself worrying about their future together. Would his disability make life more difficult for them? Could she manage any additional care he might need later on? And would society judge them? One evening, as they sat in a park watching the sunset, Lizzie decided to share her concerns. "Ryan," she began hesitantly, "I really care about you. But sometimes, I get scared. I've never been in a relationship like this before." Ryan looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "You mean because I'm in a wheelchair?" he asked, without any resentment in his voice. Lizzie nodded, feeling guilty for even bringing it up. Ryan gently took her hand. "I get it," he said. "It's not something everyone's used to, but Lizzie, I don't want you to love me despite the chair. I want you to love me for who I am, with or without it." His words struck Lizzie to her core. In that moment, she realized how much she truly loved Ryan. Not because of his differences, but because of everything he was. He was the person who made her laugh, the person who listened when no one else did, the person who made her feel whole. His disability was only a small part of his story. It wasn't who he was. Lizzie's heart swelled with emotion as Ryan's words sank in. She had spent so much time focusing on the wheelchair, worrying about what others might think, that she had almost forgotten why she had fallen for him in the first place. It wasn't about the chair. It was about who he was, kind, smart, compassionate, and with a humor that made her feel alive. She squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of her doubts slowly lifting. "I do love you for who you are," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I guess I'm scared of the unknown, of not knowing what our future will look like, but I know that I want you in it." Ryan smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "The future's always uncertain, Lizzie, but I can promise you this. Whatever happens, I'll be there with you. We'll figure it out together." For the first time since they'd met, Lizzie felt completely at peace. All the worries she had carried about their relationship seemed to dissolve in that moment. She realized that love wasn't about guarantees or perfection. It was about taking a chance, no matter what challenges might lie ahead. After that night, Lizzie and Ryan's relationship grew even stronger. They shared their lives in ways that went beyond the surface, spending time at each other's homes, meeting friends and family, and planning for the future. Ryan introduced Lizzie to a world she had never been part of before. They attended events for disability advocacy, where Lizzie met incredible people with stories that opened her eyes to the challenges and resilience of those living with disabilities. She realized that her initial doubts weren't about Ryan. They were about her own insecurities and misconceptions. One weekend, they took a trip to Central Park, Ryan's favorite spot in the city. It was a warm autumn day, the leaves turning vibrant shades of orange and red. They strolled along the paths, talking about everything from the future to their dreams. As they reached a quiet clearing near a small lake, Ryan suddenly stopped and looked at Lizzie with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "Lizzie," he began, reaching for her hand. "I know this hasn't been a typical love story, and maybe I'm not the guy you imagined yourself being with, but I need you to know something." Lizzie's heart started to race. She could feel that something big was coming. "I can't imagine my life without you anymore," Ryan continued. "You've made me realize that love isn't about who you're supposed to be with, but who you can't live without. You've shown me what it means to be loved for who I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you the same." And with that, Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lizzie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as he opened it to reveal a simple yet stunning engagement ring. "Will you marry me, Lizzie?" Ryan asked, his voice steady and filled with love. Tears welled up in Lizzie's eyes as she nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." As they embraced, the city seemed to fade away. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Just the two of them, standing together, ready to face whatever life would throw at them. Lizzie had never felt more certain of anything in her life. She had found her person, and she knew that whatever challenges they might face in the future, they would face them together. Ryan had taught her that love wasn't about perfection, but about accepting and embracing each other's differences. And now, as they stood on the edge of a new chapter in their lives, Lizzie knew that their love would be strong enough to conquer anything. In the weeks following Ryan's proposal, they began to plan their future. They would have a small wedding, intimate, with only close family and friends. But more than the wedding itself, Lizzie and Ryan focused on the life they wanted to build together. Ryan, with his work in tech consulting, often traveled for business, while Lizzie, who had a background in social work, was passionate about her job with a nonprofit organization that helped disadvantaged communities in the city. They both understood that their careers were important, but finding time for each other was paramount. One of the first big decisions they made together was to move into an apartment that was more accessible for Ryan. Lizzie had spent many nights at Ryan's place, but it was old and had narrow doorways that made moving around in a wheelchair cumbersome. They spent weekends searching for the perfect spot, a modern apartment in Brooklyn that had both charm and accessibility, with wide hallways, an elevator, and a rooftop view of the city. Ryan, ever the planner, also suggested something that took Lizzie by surprise: starting a blog together. "Why not share our story?" he asked one night as they sat on their new couch, sipping coffee and watching the sun set over the skyline. "There are so many misconceptions about what it's like to live with a disability, and I think we could help change that. We could show people that love, life, and adventure don't stop because of a wheelchair." Lizzie had always loved writing, and the idea intrigued her. "I think it's a great idea," she said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We could talk about everything: navigating relationships, overcoming challenges, even finding accessible places in the city." The blog, which they named Life Without Limits, quickly gained traction. They shared stories about their daily lives, from the simple joy of cooking dinner together to the occasional frustration of dealing with narrow doorways or inaccessible subway stations. But they also tackled deeper issues: how society often saw people with disabilities, the assumptions people made about their relationship, and the love they shared that transcended all of it. As the blog grew, so did their bond. Ryan's vulnerability in sharing personal stories about his life before meeting Lizzie brought them closer. He had been injured in a car accident in his late 20s, a life-altering event that left him paralyzed from the waist down. For years, Ryan had struggled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering if anyone could ever see past his disability. But Lizzie had, and their love gave him the confidence to live fully again. But not everyone was supportive. Some of Lizzie's friends, though well-meaning, had concerns about her relationship with Ryan. They questioned whether she was taking on too much responsibility, whether she would eventually feel burdened by Ryan's needs. Lizzie, while understanding their concerns, knew in her heart that love wasn't about perfection or ease. It was about partnership, respect, and shared dreams. "I don't feel burdened," she told one friend over lunch one day. "Ryan and I support each other, and yes, sometimes things aren't easy, but whose relationship is? What matters is that we're in this together." The challenges weren't just emotional. There were practical obstacles, too. They had to navigate the complexities of healthcare, accessibility, and the physical demands of daily life in a bustling city like New York. But Ryan's optimism and determination kept them going, and Lizzie's love for him only deepened with every hurdle they overcame. Their wedding day finally arrived, and it was a beautiful fall day in Central Park. The leaves were golden and red, and a crisp breeze carried the scent of autumn through the air. Lizzie stood in her simple, elegant dress, her heart full as she looked at Ryan waiting for her at the end of the aisle. His wheelchair was decorated with small white flowers, and his smile radiated joy. As she walked toward him, all the doubts, fears, and challenges seemed to fade away. This was where she was meant to be. In front of their closest family and friends, Lizzie and Ryan exchanged vows, promising to support, love, and cherish each other through every obstacle life would throw their way. "I vow to walk beside you or roll beside you," Lizzie said with a smile, drawing laughter from the crowd, "through everything life brings us. I love you for who you are, not in spite of anything, but because of everything." Ryan's eyes were full of emotion as he spoke his vows. "Lizzie, you've shown me that love has no limits. You've stood by me, believed in me, and made me feel whole again. I vow to love you, protect you, and cherish every moment we have together." As the wedding celebration unfolded, Lizzie and Ryan couldn't stop smiling. The vows had been exchanged, the rings placed on their fingers, and they had shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Surrounded by loved ones in Central Park, the moment was as perfect as Lizzie had imagined. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter filled the air as everyone made their way to the reception area, where tables were set beneath twinkling fairy lights. Ryan wheeled himself over to Lizzie, his hand resting gently on hers. "This day couldn't be more perfect," Lizzie whispered, looking into his eyes. The love between them felt palpable, and the future they envisioned together seemed brighter than ever. But as the evening drew closer to its end, Ryan's expression changed. He grew quiet, almost pensive, and Lizzie noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. "Are you okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed in concern. Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers, and for a moment it seemed like the world stood still. The sounds of the party faded as he reached for the microphone nearby. "I have something important I need to share with all of you," Ryan said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. Guests turned to face him, sensing that this wasn't part of the wedding plan. Lizzie's heart raced, unsure of what was coming next. "I haven't been completely honest," Ryan began, glancing at Lizzie with an expression that made her stomach knot. "There's something I've been hiding. From everyone, including you, Lizzie." Lizzie's mind raced. What could he possibly be talking about? She thought they had shared everything. Ryan looked down at his wheelchair, then back up at the guests. "For the past few years, I've been living my life in this wheelchair, and everyone, my family, my friends, you, believed I couldn't walk. But the truth is, I can." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Lizzie's eyes widened, shock overwhelming her as she tried to process what Ryan had just said. Could this be real? Without another word, Ryan slowly rose from his wheelchair. The crowd, frozen in disbelief, watched as he took one step, then another. Lizzie's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as she watched the man she thought she knew better than anyone in the world do the impossible. Ryan stood fully upright, his face filled with a mix of relief and vulnerability. "I've been able to walk for a while now," he said, his voice shaky as he addressed the stunned room. "After my accident, I was paralyzed for a time. But through months, years of physical therapy and determination, I regained my ability to walk. It wasn't easy. And when I did finally walk again, something in me changed. I was afraid of how people would see me, afraid of how it would alter my relationships, and I found it easier to keep living as if I were still paralyzed." The crowd was still in shock, but Ryan's words rang out clearly. Lizzie's head was spinning, her heart pounding as she struggled to comprehend what she had just witnessed. The man she loved had kept this from her, all while they built a life together. Ryan's eyes filled with regret as he turned to Lizzie. "Lizzie, I never meant to deceive you. I didn't know how to tell you. And the longer I kept it to myself, the harder it became. I love you more than anything, and I didn't want to risk losing you. I thought that if I told you, maybe you wouldn't see me the same way, that everything we built might fall apart." Lizzie was speechless, her emotions in turmoil. She looked at Ryan, standing, vulnerable and exposed, and felt a swirl of confusion, hurt, and love all at once. How could he have kept this secret from her? And yet, here he was, telling her the truth at last, on the most important day of their lives. For a long moment, no one said anything. Lizzie's breath came in short bursts as she tried to steady herself. Ryan took a step toward her, reaching for her hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I love you, and I hope you can forgive me." Lizzie took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had every right to be furious, every right to feel betrayed. But looking at Ryan, standing before her with such raw honesty, she realized something. This man, despite his fear and deception, was the same person she had fallen in love with. He had made a terrible mistake, but he was standing here now, asking for her forgiveness. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke softly, her voice trembling. "You should have told me, Ryan. I would have loved you no matter what." Ryan nodded, tears glistening in his own eyes. I know that now." There was a long pause as Lizzie searched her heart, trying to figure out how to move forward. The crowd watched, holding their breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she let out a shaky breath and stepped toward him, placing her hands on his chest. "We have a lot to work through," she said quietly, "but I love you, and I believe in us." Relief washed over Ryan's face as he pulled her into an embrace, his arms wrapping around her tightly. The guests, still in shock but moved by the moment, began to applaud, the sound swelling through the space as Ryan and Lizzie held each other. As they stood there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Lizzie knew that their journey wasn't going to be easy. Ryan's revelation had shaken her, but it hadn't destroyed the foundation of their love. Together, they would face this new chapter, just as they had faced everything else, side by side, with honesty and resilience. For better or worse, they had chosen each other. And now, more than ever, they would have to rebuild the trust that would carry them forward. But Lizzie believed in love's ability to heal, and as she looked at Ryan, walking, standing, but still the man she loved, she knew that their story was far from over. Leave a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.